Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 4 of the Recap Show. Today we will be talking about Manchester United, the Paris Olympics, and of course, the sports. And if you are loving what's happening on the Recap Show, please like, rate, and subscribe to our YouTube. Now let's get into our daily discussion. All right, I am so excited to be talking about this daily discussion. I think there's been a lot of changes going on in the wide world of women's sports and women's football in particular. You know, Manchester United has been in the news in always in a lot of ways, a massive club, massive brand. But the new minority owner of Manchester United, Jim Ratcliffe, was asked about the women's team. And essentially, you know, most men in his position nowadays, they'll kind of say what they're supposed to say, right? Like, oh, like, you know, we'll be investing in the women, like not anything in particular because they aren't. But he basically didn't even do that. He basically said along the lines of, oh, to be like determined what we end up doing like with the women, like basically saying like we don't have any plans for them, you know. Like, which, you know, in order for him to have even gotten a minority stake in Manchester United, he had to submit a full plan of what was going to happen, what the money was going to be used for, like what he was bringing to the table, and not one thought in his mind
and then
was about the women's club.
It just said TBD.
TBD. Men's first team, all the youth academies, all the training ground things. What's that down there? Women? Yeah. But let me just kind of back up. So the history of Manchester United women's team. Manchester United's women's team officially became a team in 2018, not too long ago, after a lot of pressure on the club that represents kind of like this global mission of football, saying like, why wouldn't this club be supporting, you know, a huge like part of the game at large, which is women's football. So very much like public pressure for them to get a women's team. They got a women's team. They hired a fantastic first coach in Casey Stoney, who, if Manchester United didn't care about the women's team, there was one person that did. It was Casey Stoney. And boy, did she, one, recruit and set up an incredible foundation of a team in Manchester United. Fast forward a couple years, they obviously get promoted to the first division, and it's COVID, and you and I are sitting at home in Portland trying to figure out what we're going to do with our football since a lot of things in the US had shut down. And we were looking at opportunities to go overseas.
I remember that. We were on our balcony, and it was just, I was just having another Wednesday, you know? And you just came out and you were like, should we go play for Manchester United? Thinking that I was going to say no, like 1,000%. You were like so confident that I would never do it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, sure. And then a week later, we packed our bags and we were there.
Yeah. Best sure ever.
The best sure ever.
And I remember actually like Manchester United at the time, obviously the brand of Manchester United is massive, right? But the women's club at that time had zero reputation. And we were like, all right, let's hear what their plan is. And we got on the phone with Casey Stoney, and immediately we knew that she was a special person, a special manager. She had already done a lot in and for the game. And the way that she spoke about wanting us to come over and play really inspired us to go.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we both have played abroad. At the time, we had previously played abroad, and I think we both loved it for so many reasons. So when you come back from playing abroad, you kind of like close that door off. You're like, now I'm home, right? And I don't think either of us ever expected to go back abroad. But when the opportunity arose to play for a emerging and fantastic coach who had built a young squad in what was the most exciting league in the world in terms of its growth and potential, it was like, absolutely. And I remember watching games before we went to the team and you pointing out a couple players, like, and I remember you pointing out Mary Earps.
Yep.
Before any of you had known who Mary Earps was, and her being like, and you saying, I like her attitude. I kind of like her swagger. I kind of like how, she's making me feel. And I remember you watching our center backs being like, great center back pairing. And like that began our journey. And now we laugh because at the time, like we didn't know any of the players. And now you would know every single one of those players.
Yeah, I mean, we had Mary Earps. We had Ella Toon still there. Katie Zellum.
Alessia
Russo.
LJ.
Lauren James. LJ. Like these are players that Ona Battier. These are players now that everyone knows from obviously the massive Euro win. But these were players that it was so sweet. They all had gotten kind of their first senior call-ups while we were with them on the team. And I remember when Chris and I were giving them hugs and saying, good luck in your first camp.
So cute.
Flash forward to where they're at now. Is huge growth. But at the same time, I think where the biggest frustration is when I heard this news was that it's typical of women's football. It feels like one step forward and two steps back because the same exact conversations that we were having with the club are happening again. And that's something that is of great frustration.
Yeah, and I'll say that I truly believe that part of the reason that Casey wanted us to come over was because Casey is a coach that has been fully fighting the good fight on behalf of women's soccer. She's a torchbearer in her own right. She's very values first as a coach. Mm-hmm. And I think she saw an opportunity for us to help lead this team on the field, of course, an experience, of course, to make the girls feel confident that they could play international soccer, of course, and you're welcome. But really, when it came to fighting for our rights and our value and for equity, I think she saw that opportunity, but we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into when we agreed to do this.
No, I even remember. So at the time, the women's team was training at a facility. I think it was a rugby facility, but it was very much like creating a COVID safe space, that we could completely own. And it was like, like nothing. It was probably one of the worst setups, but it was ours. It was completely controllable. We had our lifting in like the carousel of a stadium, like where like
next to the concessions.
The concessions of a stadium.
Like get your hot dog and do your deadlifts.
Yeah. It was like really grim.
Yeah.
It was cold. It was damp. It was everything Manchester like. But it was ours. It was completely controllable. And I actually remember because we would come to practice in normal dress clothes and obviously change into our training gear, shower, like put on our like regular clothes and leave. And that was the girls were coming in wearing their practice gear and leaving in dirty practice gear.
Yeah.
And for us, we were like, oh my gosh, like this is Manchester too. Like this is, yeah. And I remember talking to Casey and saying something like, oh, is that okay that we're like coming in our clothes? And she's like, we encourage that like level of professionalism. And like, sure enough, like a few weeks later, more and more players were doing it. And like, it's just those small little levels of like professionalizing the environment where like maybe we were in these dingy, like environments, but we could still hold ourselves to the level of professionalism that we were proud of. And that team did that. I remember Casey and, we will sing Casey's Stoney's praises. We won't get into, the here and now of what's happening with San Diego, but at Manchester United, I remember that there was a time that it had snowed or sleeted, typical Manchester on the field. And what would have been deemed an unplayable surface because our fields with most men's training grounds, they have under soil coil heating, where actually it allows them to play year long. But at our training facility, obviously, we didn't have that. Therefore, there was a layer of snow on the field.
I love this story.
And instead of Casey saying like, oh, we won't be able to train, she went out there
with the snowplow,
with her staff, pushing the snow off the field so that we could train. Like it wasn't acceptable for her to not give us a professional environment. And she was willing to like make it happen.
Sums her up so well.
And honestly, like that translated to the whole team. And I remember we had a very special team, very special locker room. And I remember we went into Christmas top of the table for Manchester United women for the first time ever. And the team had set goals in the beginning of the year, and it was to qualify for Champions League, which means finish in the top 3. Mm-hmm. And we actually then had a team meeting in December, and we said, should we reevaluate our goals? And we reevaluated our goals as a team, and we said, we are going to win the league. Manchester United, you would think they'd be like, this is Manchester United. Yes, we're going to win the league. And when Casey went to the board, to the decision makers and said, help us win the league, they said, this is a 5-year plan. Mm-hmm. We didn't expect to win the league this year. It's not part of the plan. And I think in that moment, you know, for us and our ambition going over there and what we gave, and then for Casey being like a young and super ambitious coach, like, why would we ever want to be a part of a club that the plan wasn't, when you can win the league, you win the league?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what happened, like my mind is going in so many places because this was like such a quintessential women's soccer experience. But like it kind of felt for us like we were in the past, like redoing some of the things that we had already just done. But what happened was our facility became unviable. The fields were unplayable. Yep. And what we needed to win the league was a suitable training facility. That's what we needed to win the league. And yeah, they rolled out their 5-year plan and they were so proud of it. This is our plan for the women. And what the plan was to build the men a new first team facility and move them into a pristine, modern first team facility and give the women the men's old facility. And they were so proud of that. And like that from the jump already is like screams like, you know, inequality and disrespect, but they were like literally proudly showing us that plan. And that was the best that it could have looked because what we were about to embark in that second half of the season was getting texted in the morning where we were going to train. Remember, we trained at like the original Manchester United field that had like, you know, like this little like shack on the hill, and it was like this is where Sir Alex like
Street or something. Hale Ave. Yeah. Hale Ave.
Yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing is like every life is just like a dichotomy, right? So like we are both plowing the snow on our own field and also not accepting that we didn't have a facility. So you like fight in both ways, you know? And England was such a dichotomy to me because it was so much respect and love and history of football and a serious amount of sexism that was shocking to my system, in particular when it comes to football. Yep. And so here we are playing for the most historic club in the world, one of the biggest brands in the world, you know, being brought to these old facilities and like there's so many soccer specific fields all over the countryside, right? And because we were a women's team, we were, you know, packing the bag in the morning and our poor kit man was packing everything up and driving it God knows where. And it was a nightmare. Yeah. It was a nightmare.
Yeah. And so halfway through the season, we moved to Carrington, which is, you know, a historical Man United training facility. I mean, you walk, like you come in through the gates. It's like everything is like Manchester United way. But the reality is like our office was completely different. You had these beautiful buildings that like, you know, these great players have walked through. And then you had these porta cabins that were essentially pulled out. I'm pretty sure they were like COVID offices for people that were cleaned out that we were able to occupy and then basically go home. And this was but we were like, this is the only way we have a field, like to play. We're top of the league. Like we're just looking for a field at this point. And they're like, oh, come to Carrington. We have under coil heating on, you know, 12 different fields or whatever. But the reality is nobody wanted us there. Like they were already over capacity. They had all the academies there and COVID and it's the worst of all situations. And it's this idea that we're such an afterthought. They were almost in the way. They were almost burdening the club. And yet we're trying to win the league. We're trying to be professionals. And what's holding us back is the very club that is giving us a badge on our chest to be proud of. And this is a loved club, like a loved club. But the reality is there are academy boys going into that training facility, and they're seeing the way that their women's team is treated. They're seeing, hey, I go into this amazing building. It's built for me so that I can get on that first team. And the women are over there in a porta cabin.
Yep. And we always talk about it, like we always say when like a young boy comes to an Angel City game, that's all he'll ever know is women like celebrated and playing in front of 20,000 people at the highest level. And like this was the opposite of that. It was like, this is what these boys know.
Yep.
This is what they think is normal and fair and right because they are young and impressionable and they're not making the decisions, but one day they will be.
Yep. And they wonder why so many girls don't play football in that country. Because the sexism, the gender inequality is so high, particularly in sport, particularly in football, that is so discouraging for any young girl that has a dream of becoming a footballer. Like, it's so apparent. Like, just look at the biggest club in the world, Manchester United, global club, so loved in the US. And I want to read what their mission statement is. Because for this club to stand for the things that they say that they stand for, to have the reality of the way that they treat women every single day, their own club, their own badge, what that team means to them. I want to read this to you.
Can't wait.
This is Manchester United's mission. To win the United way, the club believes it should be an active part of the community and that its success should be measured by its impact on the community, not just the number of trophies it wins. Manchester United also uses its brand to raise awareness and support for environmental and social issues at the local, national, and international levels.
Wow.
I would ask Manchester United to rethink what your mission is to the world. Because the very idea of why we're talking about this, the very idea of the things that you are saying, the things that you're putting out into the world, the very idea of what your training facility looks like, it is not the mission of the biggest club in the world. It is not the mission that you have said it is. You have a massive opportunity for you to not look at your women's team as a burden, but to look at them as an opportunity. And I want to flip the script on this because there are teams like an Angel City that are looking at women's team as an opportunity. And these are independent owned, independent run women's teams that are completely focused, completely prioritized on their women's teams being successful, both as a business, but also as a sporting team. And I want to flip the script on another announcement that happened almost simultaneously with this news on Manchester United. And that was Michelle Kang, who is obviously, most people know Michelle because she's an owner of the Washington Spirit. She also is owner of Olympique Lyonnais in France and an owner of now the London City Lionesses. And her whole initiative and motto is to support gender equality through sport. And she believes in the business of sport and what it means. And everything that she is doing is to reimagine the world using sport. Like just the most simple thing. Already purchased land, has the architect of one of our favorite places in the world, the Tottenham Hotspur training facility known as the Lodge, which for anybody that knows, go look it up. It's one of the most incredible places in the world.
Oh my gosh,
Tobin's favorite place
on earth.
Which is crazy because
also
it's
known
Tottenham,
as the Lodge.
but we'll forgive that part. But just showing a different way where women, women's teams aren't seen as a burden, but are actually seen as an opportunity and a massive opportunity in a huge emerging marketplace.
Yeah, and it's going to be so interesting to see how her teams flourish. Because, I think when we look back at that season at Manchester United, like what happened was written on the walls because the type of financial support comes with a type of spiritual support and belief that is required for success. And it's so interesting to hear that mission statement, because Manchester United, to me, symbolizes belief. Like that's like it's about community, it's about passion, and they're missing the mark on this, and there is opportunity to grow. And I know that all the players there are fighting the good fight and continue to do that. And actually, I want to leave you all with a story from our time.
Yeah.
At United, as I said, I think Casey Stoney brought us over there to help lead the off the field things. And when we were left without a facility, we started having conversations as a team with Casey, amongst ourselves, on how we were going to mobilize and try to convince the club to prioritize us. And this was sort of Tobin and I's wheelhouse, right? We were coming out of an equal pay lawsuit that had lasted 6 years, but also an eternity. And so like mobilizing, getting our information, having these like team meetings that aren't about soccer at all, was like literally our like day-to-day life experience. So we were like, oh, we got this, right? Oh, we're going to take on Manchester United. Great. Bring it on. And we started having these conversations, and I think it was really challenging to be outside of our culture. It was even shocking to just be like a fish out of water with what I had understood was like normalized in the US. It's very different in England, and England football is their primary male sport. And so the same way that in the United States, American football, like no one's welcoming women into that space, that's sort of what it feels like in England as, a soccer player, a women's soccer player. And, we were with Katie Zalm, our skipper, one of the best captains I ever played for, trying to, share knowledge and information. We were with Casey, one of the best leaders I ever played for. And I don't know how this happened, but a senior executive at Manchester United said he would come to Carrington and we would have the opportunity to speak to him about what our vision for the club was and what we needed. And this day was a rainy, cold, miserable day in Manchester. And I think our training ran long, and I think Casey got pulled into a different meeting, and I had been elected to go into this meeting and meet with an executive of Manchester United who oversaw the men and the women's programs. And we didn't have showers because that was the situation, and I was like knee deep in mud. And I just remember being like, am I seriously going to go meet with a senior executive at Manchester United, like looking like this? Like, I'm smelly, I am rained on, I am damp. It is like, this is too much. And I was just like, LFJ. Yeah. And I walked into this office, and it's, a beautiful, pristine office. He's in a suit. He's like showing me all the trophies. And I'm like, each step, I'm like, there's like treading mud behind me. And I was like, what is happening? And I don't know. I think I had like the Holy Spirit fill me because I just like sat down and I finally just read this man the riot act. I just said like exactly what I believed that the team deserved. And we were on 1-year contracts, and it didn't feel like we had anything to lose. And I just felt like what an honor and an opportunity to stand up for these women. And I remember Casey walked in halfway through the meeting, and I hope Casey hears this and I hope it makes her laugh. But she walked in halfway through the meeting and her jaw just dropped at the sight of me, like just such a smutty mess, like just defending what should truly be ours as women to this man who it was so far off his radar. And so I think that it was really sad to see the news that the women were being displaced again in their training facilities. I think this is the 5-year plan that they presented to us. I think they are building a new facility for the men. And while they're in this transition period, the women have been displaced once again. And I hope the Holy Spirit fills each and every one of them, and that they feel the confidence to go and stand in their truth, that they have value, and that they deserve all the things. And, women's football in the UK is booming. There is such an economic opportunity. There is such a cultural and social opportunity. And Manchester United, you have to see the light. And I really hope they do.
Contrary to popular belief, dehydration isn't the biggest problem facing athletes. Overhydration is. Thanks to misguided hydration guidelines, you see lots of athletes overhydrate and dilute blood sodium levels, which can cause headaches, fatigue, muscle cramps, weakness, dizziness, and more. Not cool. Enter Element. Element has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to help you feel and perform your best. Plus, it has zero sugar and artificial colors. I love the way Element tastes and how it makes me feel. Have you tried the chocolate salt with coffee in the morning? Or sometimes I'll go for a little spice with the mango chili flavor before sitting down to watch a game. Element came up with a fantastic offer for us on the Recap Show. Just go to drinkelement.com/recap for free sample pack with any purchase. That's drinklmnt.com/recap. Also try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. And the best part is Element offers a no question asked refund. Try it totally risk-free. You have nothing to lose and electrolytes to gain. Big thanks to Element. Now back to the Recap Show.
So now we get to the very special segment of the show, which we are calling the Mailbag episode.
Yeah.
About France 2024, about the Olympics. So for the Mailbag episode, we have a bag of mail.
You're so excited about this.
I am excited about my bag of mail. Like, look, it's an actual bag of mail. Do you want to tell them what the Mailbag episode's going to be?
I assume it's going to be us answering a bunch of questions. I think this is like kind of like community questions, but like extended and kind of focused on the Olympics. That's at least what I've been told. And actually, I have no idea what's in there.
Yeah, so our community questions are our members, our reimaginers, submit questions to us each week, and we answer a few, and it's everybody's favorite segment. So we decided to extend it, elongate it, and we actually took questions from everybody, from social, from our whole larger community, and the team behind the team selected a bunch of questions, and they put them in this bag of mail, which I'm very excited about.
They better not have pulled any dirty tricks on us.
And I'm feeling like the bag of mail is making a lot of noise in the mic, but sorry about that, everybody. So now we are going to, I'm going to pull a question and ask you, and then you pull a question and ask me. Is that how it's going?
I think it's like going to be more of a discussion because this is kind of like opening up to our reimaginers to kind of participate in like more of a conversation with us.
All right.
Let's do it.
So basically, this bag of mail is our guest.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a long question.
I hope the first question's kind of like I'm a little nervous.
Liz from Boston asks, with no Alex Morgan, who emerges as the media face of the USWNT at the Olympics this summer, if anyone? In the media wave of Caitlin Clark in women's sports, what is the impact going to be on the U.S. women's national team if a media face doesn't emerge?
Well, I love this question, actually. It's a great question to jump into.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Liz from Boston. So I actually think there's like kind of two versions of the national team that's kind of like being asked in this one question, which is like media face to me is like kind of there's two different characters. There's one kind of that represents like kind of the brand of the national team that like gets all the sponsors and stuff like that, kind of leads the team in marketability.
Okay.
And then I think there's like the leaders of the team that like are really like the voice of the team. And that can be like outward, but it's also inward. And I actually think I'll start with kind of like more of like the voice of the team because I think Alex kind of played a little bit of this role as well. But I think Emma Hayes actually is a huge voice of the team right now. And I think the loudest voice of the team that I've heard. I mean, of all I kind of referenced her as like the biggest signing of the U.S. Women's National Team because it feels like to me that's the only voice I hear coming out of the U.S. Women's National Team is hers. I think that's pretty intentional.
Why do you think that is?
I think she's a big character. And I think that this kind of generation, there wasn't really like a big character that really emerged out of it. And I don't know if it's because for so long there was the same kind of run of folks that really led the team that didn't really like kind of nurture that next kind of big voice, I would say. But when I look at kind of the voice of reason, you know, that is coming out of this team, like I think of Naomi Girma, like I say this over and over again, I would have given her like the captaincy like during the World Cup. Like, and I don't know if I said that on the recap show, but I certainly was thinking that it was a good time, even though she's young. For me, she looks like a strong leader for, the next decade of the US Women's Nash team.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about this?
Well, I actually agree with your point. It's like a little bit of a star and a spokesperson.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit different. And I think that the truth is a star merges when the team wins and someone scores a bunch of goals. Like that's just what it is. Like Mia Hamm, Abby Wambach, Alex Morgan.
Will always be an attacking player.
Yeah, it will. Because we had some stars like, in the goal and across the back line and still was never the face of the team. It always has to be a forward. Yeah. Sorry. But I think that comes with success. If this team's going to go on to win Olympic gold and they're going to have a forward that's in form, that's leading the charge, that I believe that will become the face of the team. Like that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And then for a spokesperson, I kind of like your take on it's really Emma. And I think that's because she's built herself a brand that's beyond football. She has really strong values and opinions. We talked about it on this show that she has, like in Chelsea, she had the training for all the men's coaches.
Yeah.
She's really, created and developed a strong personality that it has been, buzzing with interviews and, showing up on television, and her voice is really loud. So it'll be interesting to see how that emerges.
Okay. Chloe from New York City, nice, asks, what activity would you have a gold medal in if it were an Olympic sport?
I think the answer is none. I don't even have a gold medal in football. Well, were you about to say puzzling?
No, although I do think that should.
I would need about a decade of training in puzzling, and then I think I could do it.
Yeah, I think you would win a gold medal in debating.
But the thing is,
project poetry, remembering things, like being able to remember something and say it back, like a whole novel, and then be able to remember it and say it back.
Okay, so Chloe, I really appreciate the question, but you know what I truly believe? It would be disrespectful for me to say I would win gold in anything, because there are world-class debaters, there are world-class poetry readers, there are world-class puzzlers, and yeah, I can dabble in those hobbies, but like you need training and excellence that I don't have, but I could at this point turn my life to one of them if we would like me to, and see what happens in 3 Olympics.
You're right. You need that dedication.
What about you?
I actually think if you were to put every single sport together in the Olympics.
Oh, you've always said this.
I would win the gold medal.
Of
all the sports. Like, it's like kind of like the what's the where you do like all the track things?
I'm going to call it a heptathlon because that's what you kind of
But I think there's an even bigger one. Like, is that? Yeah, maybe that's the biggest version of it. Yeah, I wouldn't win that one. But if you add all of them,
okay, so
all the sports together.
Let's play this out. Basically,
even winter. Even add in winter. I'll take winter too.
Oh my gosh, that's ambitious. Okay, so let's just imagine this.
Yeah.
You surf, you skateboard, you ribbon dance, you swim.
Yep.
Is it all individual? Like, can you play basketball?
Like, try to think of one that like you'd be like, no.
I think ribbon dancing you would really struggle with. I actually couldn't see you on doing the mat on the floor in gymnastics. But
gymnastics, flexibility. No.
Yeah, and you're really not bendy.
Liz, another Liz.
Liz, are you submitting multiple questions
from different areas? Liz from New Jersey asks, "What are your thoughts on Alex not making the roster? The lack of veteran experience on the team."
Yeah, I think my first reaction was it was a little sad because it did feel like the end of an era where, Alex kind of represented this entire movement that our generation of player was a part of. Mm-hmm. Winning gold, winning World Cups, and usually in tournaments that I've been a part of, there has been a very veteran player, like maybe even older than, what Alex is 35.
Yeah, we always had like 39-40. I feel like there was always one there.
Christy in 2015,
Christy
Carly
Rampone,
played really late. So like it kind of felt like cut short for like the very, very, I don't want to say old, but like the veteran, you know, the veteran's veteran.
Yeah.
It felt like too soon. As we said, we have Lissy there holding it down. Goalkeepers have a lot more longevity in their career anyway. So Lissy, we hope you're playing for another 5 years, maybe another decade. Poor thing. I don't know if you're going to handle it, Lissy, but you got to do it for all of us. But yeah, I think that like changing of the guard was really like solidified. And I think when I think about the development of the team and I think about the baton passing and the handoff, I think many of us didn't feel like we quite had that. I think it was disrupted by COVID, and it was, during a time where there was almost this feeling of like young versus old instead of young and old.
Yeah.
And I think that felt disappointing. And yet, there are a number of players on this roster that have won a World Cup, that have been to an Olympics, and that did spend a lot of time with our generation of player.
Yeah, I think yes and no. Like if you take the last like major tournament that we won, which was 2019, you look and the only players that started that 2019 final were Alyssa and Crystal.
Rose.
And Rose.
And Lindsay wasn't starting, but she was a big part of the team.
Yeah. That's decent. But then I did read somewhere that nobody on this roster has won a gold medal. It's the first time ever.
It is. Yeah, and
which
Alex would have been the one that had won.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like Alex Morgan has been like such a big brand of the U.S. Women's National Team that it almost feels like surreal that this could happen. Like, it's almost like kind of, there's like the footballer in Alex Morgan and the brand of Alex Morgan. Mm-hmm. It's like, it almost felt like the brand was like untouchable, you know? So I kind of was in a little bit of disbelief.
Yep.
But also, like, if this was a World Cup roster, like, yeah, you have space, you know? But it's, you time out at different times. But I think we talked about it. This is the first kind of player, like the big brand of the U.S. Women's National Team. You think of Mia Hamm, Abby Wambach, Carly Lloyd, like these are Ballon d'Or winning, players. They all kind of got to time out when they wanted to. And it didn't mean they were necessarily on the field, but like they timed out, and they got...
None of them got dropped from their last roster they were trying to make.
Yeah. So that feels really hard and sad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like the symbol of what Alex is and has been. She's on and off captain the team for 5 years. She has been a steady presence. I always say like defenders fear her no matter what she's actually doing on the field. Before she steps on the field, she has that presence. And then most importantly, like she's such a winner. She's such a competitor. Yeah. And like, I actually think of Alex, I think of the Olympics more than the World Cup. Yeah. Like, her best tournaments were the Olympics. Yeah. And she's, like, kind of, like, just, like, fits the role so well of, like, her brand and her personality to, like, be a strong female Olympian. It's just, like, so perfect. Yeah. So I think in that way, I feel surprised and also sad because, I mean, I'm sure she will get celebrated and get her flowers, but it never feels good to have someone who is so important to the program, kind of have this kind of like sour taste in the end. And then from like a footballing standpoint, I think I really wanted a clear reason why. And we talked about this and you were like, maybe we got one, but it just, I think Emma gave like the most like media trained answer ever, which she just kept saying like, well, I picked other players and other players are awesome. And it's like, that's true, but why did you not select her? I wanted to hear why. And if the reason was form, like my other players are scoring and Alex is not, like that's a reason. Yeah. And so I felt like we just kind of got that like left hanging and we can all just like assume it's because of club form. She's been hanging on to injury or maybe that she didn't, value having someone on the roster that had won before as much as she valued someone that she really felt like she could sub in and make a difference in a game. Yeah. But I was just like left being like, well, what did that phone call sound like? Yeah. What was the real reason?
And I think she also, if you look at like this forward line, Emma also could have felt like she had already kind of had that time with this group.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
she had a World Cup with this group.
Yeah.
Like she got to impart them with like her experience in that type of tournament. And I think there is like a big shadow, right, on all of the attackers when Alex Morgan's like around, you know, and maybe like in a lot of ways, this is the next step for this like young group of attackers to like actually have to emerge.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is like, one, it was shocking because like, you know, she didn't make, I want to say like Gold Cup where she believes. And then she ended up starting and playing like every minute. So you're sort of like, you just can't get rid of her, you know, like she was just always going to be there.
I actually asked you, if she had more time with Emma in camp, do you think she makes this roster? Because the thing about Alex Morgan, her greatest attribute in everything is her as a competitor.
Yeah.
And like, if she had more time with Emma in that environment, she 100% would have shown that.
Wow.
Fully healthy.
Yeah. And so that kind of leads to like kind of how I wanted to like close this part is like, I also feel like it's a shift in emphasis to club soccer. So this has been happening for the last decade, right? But like, I remember we were just talking about 2012 when y'all were like in residency preparing. The last Olympics that the US won gold, the team was in residency.
Yep.
So just think about that, the amount of training you had, time together you had compared to every other country who was not in a residency, right? Yeah. So it was just such an advantage in terms of how much resource the team had compared to the competition. And now we have a coach that came from club soccer, that, you know, came from Europe. And I think in the United States, we've always had like, and it's been to varying degrees, but this understanding that like, you know, some of our best American footballers have been really bad in club. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be bad in a tournament because what it requires to play every 3 days, to grind it out, to basically like strap your body up, tape it on and just like grit it out is not the same thing that allows you to be like the MVP of the NWSL, right? And so we've always, that's sort of why it's like, you know, you kind of get a pass. Like, oh, you played in 8 games, you didn't score, but like that doesn't necessarily say you can't score in an Olympics because like, let's look back at your Olympics. And I think that, you know, as the game continues to evolve, the club game is just going to continue to be more and more important.
Absolutely.
Jordan from Alabama asks, if you could poach one player from another country to wear red, white, and blue, who would it be and why?
Oberdorf from Germany.
Oh.
Any, like, honestly, I always say, like, the German mentality fits really nicely with the American mentality. I would pick Oberdorf. Like, she would have been, like, a great replacement to a Julie Ertz as our six. You know, we spent, I mean, I hate to, like, bring this back up because nobody wants to talk about the last World Cup, but I feel like we wasted years trying to find, like, the next Julie Ertz when we should have just modernized and figured out a different way of playing. And
do you think
because
we have
we changed our style finally. We realized that you can, well, one, you always have to evolve. Like the game of football is modernizing so quickly. Like you can't just like try to fit a circle into a square.
Let's go into a little tangent. Okay. How have we evolved to play so that we don't need a Julie Ertz?
Now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think our midfield will be Sam Coffey, who will be our more traditional 6, but she'll be supported heavily, like in build-up with Lindsay Horan, and then with like a more creative 10 in Rose Lavelle. And I think the biggest thing that we did is we have more of a playmaking build out of the back 6.
Okay,
and we have flexibility with our 8 to be able to help and build up.
Okay, so this is me asking. That's basically the exact same midfield, but you just switched Sam and Julie, which are very different styles, right?
No.
So how's because it was Lindsay and Rose. So how did the rest of the team actually accommodate a more playmaking 6? Because to me, it seems like we just replaced the player with someone who plays differently.
More patience. And I actually think like the team's finally figuring out how to activate Sam Coffey, and it's more patience in the buildup. Like you need to give a 6 room to develop the attack. Before we were so regimented, it would be like 1-2, play out, try to build. And now I see a much more fluid, dynamic buildup that involves Sam as actually like, and I think it's the relationship between Lindsay and Sam. Look, like Lindsay's instinct is always to get on the ball, is always to go and build. And it's like, no, we have a player that we trust that is going to work side by side with you to help in the buildup. Trust this player. And finally, we're seeing a relationship develop that's built on trust, saying, I can do this job. Stay in the area that you need to stay in for buildup to make this build out successful. Trust me. And I think like Emma putting a lot of trust in Sam Coffey, which it looks like she's doing, we're finally starting to see a relationship develop and a clear understanding of how the US women's national team wants to build out. And then a counter press, like I always say, like, you know, with Sam, like the more like verticality she can have on her passes, the more she can play pass lines, like the more effective the US women's national team would be. And you can see that as she's started to gain confidence, she's playing forward more, she's playing further passes more, and she's connecting more with her midfield with it. And specifically, I'd say with Lindsay, her and Lindsay like are going to be like very core to the way the US women's national team.
Do you think that Lindsay's given more of a clear role? Because she was like roaming.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
You think that's the biggest adjustment?
Yeah, I think in ways that I think Lindsay still gets an opportunity to really dictate kind of the tempo of attack. I still think she's
But if she's holding in better positions, she can dictate the attack instead of the build out.
Exactly, yeah. Because Lindsay always will be better for the US women's national team being further up on the field. And if she's being asked to play every role in the midfield, we're losing her best qualities. And we're also,
as a 9.
Midfield will never work. It will never be balanced. It will never work like that. So I actually think it's almost like more direction in terms of for her that is more helpful to her. And that's like kind of counterintuitive with a player like that, right? Like she actually needs more structure, even though like her instinct like is to always go. But it's like, no, wait. Like walk more. Like I think you'll see this midfield actually staying in positions longer. Like, and I think that's a huge difference. Like you're seeing just players run. It's like, no, when you're building, you have to be very specific in the areas of the field that you're going to be working in. And a lot of times that means just holding space. Don't move. Like walk more in build up.
You're a big proponent of the walk smart.
Jennifer from Florida asks, do you have any feelings on Korbin being selected to the Olympic squad?
Firstly, I would say we talked about this at length on episode 2.
Yep.
I think with our, it was in our daily discussion, but Mia was the guest. So go back and listen to that episode for more details. We had a great discussion about it, and I think the kind of to summarize it here, and we can go into it a little bit differently, I think the biggest disappointment I have is actually on the U.S. soccer program at large, because I think they've put a lot of onus on other people to make individual decisions about this. And so like right now, everyone's saying, how could Emma include her? But I think the decision is beyond Emma.
Yeah.
It's she came into this situation 3 months after it had already started, and a precedent had been set that nothing was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I think the onus is on U.S. soccer to have better standards and a code of conduct that is super clear and outlines this. I think I've been disappointed in the selection. In the conversation about her selection, I've been disappointed that everyone's reducing this topic, which is homophobic and transphobic comments online, to her social media activity. I think that's reducing, the entire topic into something that's easier to say. Yeah. And I think we need to say it for what it is, because words are damaging, and we're not trying to help Korbin, have different social media activity.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is values and beliefs need to be upheld.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that, when we're talking about this topic, we do it with the respect for how sensitive it is and how dangerous it is to make these types of comments, and we don't reduce it down to something that's easy for us to say, like, oh, well, her social media, we've talked to her about like how she shows up on social media. It's not that.
Yeah. And I think like there was one thing that stood out to me is like there's been a lot of talk about this being worked on behind the scenes. Like things are happening that we're not seeing, that we're not privy to, which we know like a lot happens behind the scenes, right? But I think that like there was another player that came out and was asked about the situation. And I think it was their response to the situation that made me question what kind of work is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because even the work that maybe we're expecting of, Korbin, who's a young player, she's 20 years old, like to be doing, Emma seems to want to nurture her, to help her understand her responsibilities and also like her like wrongdoings.
Yeah.
And I think that that's encouraging from a leadership perspective, but I'm also curious like what's really going on, because hearing other players be asked about the situation and hearing their responses to it, I don't see much work or understanding of what the implications of what she did, how harmful it actually was, and how serious it's actually been taken. Because the rhetoric that it sounds like is like everybody's kind of has the right to their own opinion.
Yeah, and I think that the public is being asked to just embrace her, and it's like give the public a reason to embrace her, right? Like,
yeah.
Like I think what the heart of our discussion on the prior episode was like, if there's all this background work happening, well, it was an external set of statements and comments and likes, so it should be some external work and growth, right? Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, it's when you're a member of the U.S. Women's National Team, your words reflect the group, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not what I think your point is. It's not just what Korbin has or has not said about it. It's that the team at large, when asked about it, has not come out and said anything that's making the public feel better about the situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way I felt about it, because those are the people that are hopefully making up the majority of like the locker room,
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say about this, and it was actually something and an opportunity that you and I had to learn when we were preparing for these conversations, was, our instinct was to say like, you know what, I'm just going to be honest with all of you. It's really, really hard for us to sit here as older players talking about someone who's 20 years old and being critical. I actually don't have a good feeling at all criticizing another player. Like that's not what I want to be here doing. And I think we're doing our best to toe the line of having like respect and kindness and love and grace for her, and also holding space for the community that we love so much that has been deeply hurt by this. Yes. So our instinct at first, Tobin and I were like, like she's 20 years old. Like, we got to cut her slack or we can't talk about this. And someone on our team reminded me that to talk about how old she is and to talk about the grace that we think she truly does deserve, which is real and big. We also have to talk about who doesn't get that grace in our society. And so I think in even in the first discussion that we had, we said like, what were we doing when we were 20? Like we didn't have all the like the insights and the education and the knowledge. And it's really important to think about who in our society never gets that grace. Yeah. And so you think back to cases where, there's young white boys and they're getting, grace and they're getting let go because of their age and their youthfulness, but young Black men do not get that type of grace. And so all of the intersectionality of these things is layered, and like there's a level of protection that's happening based on her demographic. And that has nothing to do with whether it's right or wrong, because my belief is that we should all get that grace, right? Yeah. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve the grace because other people don't get it. I'm saying that like we need to make sure that we're having a dialogue about why we're giving some people grace that other people don't afford.
Amen. Thank you so much for saying that, because that's such an important part of this equation. And thank you. Oh, you just smiled. There's something in this question.
No, I feel that the mailbag episode,
it's like, yeah, go ahead,
had a lot of unknowns for us. And usually our community writes questions that says C to T and T to C, and everyone's really specific and our members know so well. And this was like, what's going to happen? And every question I've drawn, I'm like, thank God this is going to Tobin. It's just like the right question for you. So Angela from Orange County asks, given your past experiences in the Olympics, what unique challenges and opportunities do you anticipate for the USA women's team in the 2024 games that are unique to the Olympics setting?
Yeah, the Olympics is such a unique tournament. Like, it's so different from the World Cup because obviously the World Cup, like the full focus is on you. So much attention, the whole world. And the Olympics, you're part of like this big collective. Like, you're actually not important at all to the Olympics until a semifinal, or even maybe not even a semifinal, until like a final. And that's just like the nature of the beast. And also people don't realize is like, you're not a part of Paris. Like, everybody says like the Paris Olympics, like, oh my gosh, when do you get to Paris? And you're like, we don't until we basically get to the semifinal or the final.
Yeah.
That's when like your Olympics actually starts. So like, you're actually kind of touring like whatever country you're in, you're playing like around, and like you kind of feel like a little bit like unseen.
Oh,
for
yeah.
a big part of it.
I never made it to Rio. We never made it to Rio.
Yep.
Still
Rio,
to this day, I've never been to Rio.
Just played in the Rio Olympics, never went to Rio.
It was that was actually like the biggest like insult to injury.
Yeah, people don't realize that. Folks that, you know, go to watch the Olympics, they don't realize that. But what's kind of like really cool is like once you get to a semifinal, and this is what's also unique to the Olympics, is if you win the semifinal, it basically ensures that you've won a medal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you go into a final already knowing that you won something significant. Like, in a World Cup, nobody cares if you come in second. Like, nobody. But in an Olympics, like, if you win a silver medal or a bronze medal, people still make you feel like a winner. Even though I think for the US Women's National Team, like, absolutely not. You don't feel like a winner. But like, there's still part of this Olympic experience and like these idea of medals that is very unique to the Olympics. So I would say like that, and it's a quicker tournament. People don't realize that you have one less day in between games than you do in a World Cup to turn around. It's only 6 games to the final, and also like a bunch of teams are missing. Like Sweden, who we play every single Olympics, is missing. Like, what is an Olympics without Sweden?
England.
I don't know.
Well, I guess England's always missing. Team GB.
Team GB, whatever you want to call them. Like, they're missing, you know, like the Dutch, they're missing.
They're
like,
missing?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
These are like huge powerhouses. And
Wow,
then I would say, and I'm going to say this, the sneaky team in an Olympics is always Japan. Watch out. I'm telling you, like, that team, they just, World Championships, they just show up, and everybody's talking about Spain.
Well, did you remember that last Olympics, Zambia was there, and Barbara Banda, that's her name, right? Barbara Banda apparently scored 2 hat tricks.
Incredible.
And it was like before we knew who she was.
I know, and now she's just
scoring hat tricks.
Can't stop scoring in the NWSL.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Do you have any takeaways for the Olympics?
Well,
the uniqueness of it?
Yeah, I will say that, you know, I think the question was what's like this team specifically going to face. And I actually think a big one is that no one there has seen the journey and seen the playbook of victory. And I actually think back in tournaments that I've been on, and knowing that there were players like by my side that had won before really matters. Mm-hmm. And I know that it does translate like deep in a tournament, in a World Cup and an Olympics, like what it takes is similar.
Yeah.
But I think that will be a particular challenge for this group, is they're going to have to forge a completely new path, like a new path to victory. And I actually have this memory of Alex, and I don't know what world championship it was, but it was like going into a semifinal, and she was like bruised and battered. And, first Alex Morgan that we knew was like run behind and like score these beautiful goals. And then the second Alex, like the evolution of Alex was like just like take hits from center backs and like draw fouls. And like she was just getting like brutalized. And I always talk to you about this because there's this image of like from the outside what the games look like. And it's like everyone sees you stand on the podium and they see you score and they see your celebration. But like, I just remember her at the meal room, like almost unable to like get up from her seat and like just being like, this is the most miserable thing. And like every single world tournament, like this is what it's like. And then she just like, miserable. You know, put her body back together and like kind of try to get through practice to like go again. And it's like that type of experience, knowing what it's going to actually take to make a run deep into a tournament. It's like you can only know it if you've done it.
Yep.
And then the last thing I'll say is, do you remember when we won our third place match in the last Olympics and got a bronze medal and we called it rose gold?
I do. Yeah. And I remember, because it was the COVID Olympics, that like we didn't get to hang out with each other like the whole entire tournament, which is so weird. Like if there's anything that was like the most like weird about that tournament, it was like we as a team didn't even get to interact with each other. Like the only time we interacted with each other was when we went to practice for like an hour and a half. And then other than that, we couldn't interact with each other. And I remember at the end of the tournament, finally, we all were in a room together. Because at this point, like, who cares if you get COVID? Like, finally, we all hung out and we were all kind of like weird about it. We were like, how do we act in a room with all together, you know? And I remember Sam being like, if we had only been able to do this in the tournament, like, how different would our tournament have been? Like, this is the first time we've actually even talked to each other.
It was.
You know?
Yeah. But I will say that it was that during that Olympics that my morning routine was born. Because we spent so much time alone that I just started with the skincare.
You're the only one that thrived in that.
I know. Yeah. Everyone was like, oh, this is so miserable. I'm like, I'm having the greatest time. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I picked up a new hobby. I read fantasy. I have a 45-minute skincare routine. Like, I love my me time. I'm thriving.
Only Christen Press.
Yeah.
All right, last one, right?
This good old bag of mail.
All right, last question.
All right.
You ready for this?
We'll see.
Emma from Memphis asks, did you ever hang out with any other Olympians besides soccer players? And if so, who was your favorite?
Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, when Tobin pulled this question, she had an ear-to-ear grin. So who is she thinking that I hung out with? Oh, Neymar?
You hung out with Neymar at the Olympics?
Okay, I hope that our team can pull up this photo. I've been really trying to integrate photos into the show. No one else is a fan of this, but there is a photo of me and Neymar and Meghan, Klingenberg, and Marcelo, and we had played ping pong.
You're right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I wrote a blog. I was writing my Rookie for Life blog at the time, and I wrote a blog about how I like had sweat like coming down and like I had like pit stains and like it was like the most embarrassing moment of my life. So that's how I remember it. So that was a good Olympian. That's not who you were thinking of?
No. I was curious what your Olympic stories were.
That was 2012.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's your favorite?
I remember also 2012 when we won, we partied with men's USA basketball. I remember that.
She says with a huge smile, like, what's the tea there? Oh my gosh, I know who you could say. When you were really young and you made your favorite soccer player.
So everybody knows, you know, I fell in love with football through like Brazilian football, and my favorite player ever was Ronaldinho. And at the 28 Olympics,
28?
2008.
That's not getting good. That was so weird.
Olympics, I hung out with Ronaldinho, and it was like incredible.
Okay, tell me what that was like.
Well, actually, I think this is going to sound really weird.
I know, that's why.
But basically, like, because the one thing is you feel very like football centric because you actually share the same hotels as men's football, and everybody knows men's football is under 23, so it's not their senior team. So you get actually kind of this mixed bag of young players and then some older players that they bring to the games. But they follow us around, and we all play in the same stadiums, and we all share the same hotels. So it's really cool that you're actually like very much part of like Olympic soccer or Olympic football as one collective. So like Kristen mentioned, we shared hotels a lot of times, and we shared the hotel with Brazil. Ronaldinho was on the team, and he basically like had like an open room, and folks just came up and hung out with
sort of like a dorm room party.
It was felt Oh my gosh, it felt like a dorm room
If you were
party.
in Ronaldinho's dorm room, that is a very sketchy story.
It was very like, it felt like very like Brazilian, like music, hanging out, like laughter.
That does not make it better.
I know.
That just made it even less PG.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, it was really fun. And then I remember like running after Usain Bolt, which is like kind of just like funny, like running after Usain Bolt. I remember that one pretty well. I don't know which Olympics that was.
I think 2012, because we did not have a village in the last two.
Yeah.
So the last two, the answer is nobody.
But I think like I remember actually the first time I met Serena Williams was in the dining hall, which like at the Olympics, they have these massive dining halls.
With McDonald's.
But with
this is not an
every cuisine across the world they have in this dining hall because
America's represented by McDonald's.
So we had everybody had like their own cuisine, like really nice, and then it was like McDonald's. But like it was the place that was like the who's who. Like it's like kind of an insane thing. Like all the best athletes in the world, like in one cafeteria, like fueling for their event. And what you realize, I think, in that moment is like no athlete is the same, like in terms of physique and body. Like they're all the best at what they're doing. And yet, like you look around and you can kind of be like, oh, that athlete must do this based on like, you know, what they looked like. And that was really fun. The village in general, like if you don't make it to the village, it's like you can't even say, in my opinion, that you've played in an Olympics.
Well, you can, but you didn't get the full experience. I get where you're going.
Right. You absolutely can. But then when you travel home, I will say, like traveling home with a medal is one of the best feelings. Like you get on the plane and they kind of like everyone that's kind of like going home, like it's like, oh, did you win a medal? And there's like a huge thing. And like you're going through the security and you're like beeping and you're like, oh, sorry, it's just my medal. Like that was probably, I think the Olympics is so cool. I wish the best for the US women's team because honestly, like I hope that they have to remove their medal in security to get home because that would be so fun. And I think it would really like just put, you know, the US women's team back into the place that they belong.
Yeah, we're so excited for the tournament. We are going to be covering the Olympics and women's football at the Olympics with the show. And thank you so much for submitting your questions. We had so much fun with this and we hope that you did too. If you liked this episode, you can like, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to get future questions on the show, you can join our membership on our website. And then every single episode, we accept questions from our members and we answer them in a short segment on the show. But really, our membership is the coolest community in women's sports. So there's an opportunity to recap the recap show with all of your fellow viewers and audience, as well as watch live games with pros, with Tobin, with other members, and connect. We're trying to create a safe and fun place on the internet, and our reimaginers are awesome.
So we will be going on a short hiatus to rev up our engines for the Olympics, but we're going on a 2-week break. But we will be right back here on these couches with insane guests as we go into a really exciting period of this summer. So stay tuned. Want more of the recap show? Never miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.